In this video, we're going to really focus on negative self-talk. And one of the key points of negative self-talk is we're discovering the topic of language. Now, language is the tool that we have to describe our experience. So if we think experience is the uppermost, it's the most powerful, the most influential, we then wrap our language around that to be able to communicate about it, to share it, and to discuss it. So the language that we use has a huge impact on our physiology and our psychology. And there are a couple of key components that actually, when you start to make some small changes in, can drastically reduce how long you feel anxious for and the intensity of the anxiety. So they're really, really key. The first one is simple. It's a three-letter word that forms a question. And that question is why? Okay, so to introduce this topic, we're going to do just a little exercise. I'd like you to think about a hobby or a work-related exercise that you'd like to be better at, but obviously you aren't better at it yet. So something you'd like to improve on, a hobby or a work-related exercise. Okay, and then I'd like you to ask yourself, why aren't you better at that yet? Why aren't you better at that now? Okay. And then finally, I'd like you to think about, how do you feel about the answer you just came up with, or the answers you just came up with. 99% of people will say when they thought about how they felt about the answer, they felt a little bit flat, a little bit deflated, a little bit low, a little bit dejected. It'll have a heaviness to it, a bit of a like that. The reason for this is that when you're already in a negative state, so if you're doing an away from pattern, and you ask yourself a why question, your mind will then go and search through all of your mental databases for all of the possible answers for why you aren't good enough or improved enough at this moment in time. So what happens is your mind starts serving up negative or unpleasant or uncomfortable potential solutions about why you aren't better at that yet. And when you connect to that, often that has the heavy or the sort of deflated type of feeling. When we apply this to anxiety, if you're asking yourself, why am I feeling anxious? Why can't I stop feeling anxious? Why isn't this going differently? Then we've created another one of those perfect storms. So first of all, we think about mental imagery. The question is, why am I feeling anxious? So in order for that to happen, there will be an image, a visual representation of you feeling anxious. So that already sets the brain off to start creating those chemicals. But then when you accompany it with a why, your mind then also creates equally negative potential solutions. So then all of a sudden you've got negative imagery, you've got negative solutions, and your body will start to feel heavy and low. And that is what creates a cycle of anxiety, because often we don't stop at one why. Why am I feeling anxious? Why isn't this changed yet? Why does it seem to affect me but not them? All of these why questions just sit under the surface of your conscious awareness and create a cycle of anxiety that just spins and spins and spins and gets worse over time. These why questions can become automatic and they become unconscious. So you have to pay really close attention to when you're using these why questions. And that's why it's helpful to have someone external, whether that be a family member or a friend, just to point out when you do it. Because often it will be so automatic and you'll just say, I don't know why I'm anxious today. And having that external feedback is a really good tool to actually disrupt it. So we've got our why question. How do we deal with this? So we simply change the language. So anytime that you notice yourself asking a why question, so why am I feeling anxious? We're going to swap the why with either a how or a what, and then watch what happens. So we're basically flipping the language we're using. So instead of why am I feeling anxious, it's how can I feel calmer? Or what can I do to feel more in control? So we move our away from to our towards. So get, gain, have, control, calm. And then we're asking ourselves how and what, because that gets us looking for solutions. So rather than having potential reasons for why you aren't good enough, you start to create potential options for how you can get what you want. This creates different mental imagery, it has a different impact on the physiology, and therefore a different impact on your psychology. So when you're focusing on hows and whats, anxiety just can't get into that cycle, and you disrupt it really, really quickly and really powerfully. So all we're doing is taking out the whys. I recommend people do this for 30 days. Usually 30 days is where you'll really notice how much of a change there's been. And I'm not saying the question why is bad. I'm just saying that when you're in this anxiety state, it just perpetuates it. So we want to help you get out of that, and then of course you reintroduce it in different ways, how it can be powerful and influential. The next bit that we're going to talk about in terms of self-talk is generalizations. Now, a generalization is when we take one or a few bits of our experience and we generalize it to lots of different other items or contexts. So at best, a generalization is how we learn. When you were younger, you were showed what a door is and how a door works. You turn the handle and you pull. And then you didn't have to be told what every other door was after that. Once you'd learnt it once, you were able to generalize it to all doors. So in one context, generalizations are really powerful. In a different context, and when we apply them to anxiety, they can cause overwhelm and they cause anxiety to really spike up and increase. So if you're someone who uses these words, always, every, never, nothing, no one, these are signs and feedback that generalizations are actually distorting how you're feeling. And again, this isn't something to feel blame for or to criticize yourself for. We were never taught this. But actually, when we start to pay attention to it, we can start to change things quite quickly. Because if you're in a situation and you're saying, I always feel anxious when I'm with the team, I never look forward to these team building events, no one understands what I'm going through. Every time I go to work and I'm with Kevin, I feel this way. When we're using these generalizations, we're basically moving into what we call black and white thinking, also known as polarized perceptions. And when we're in a black and white thinking process, we have no flexibility, there's no grayscale, there's no adaptability, which means your nervous system immediately feels stressed because you don't have any options. If you know that you always feel anxious, then whenever you think about that context, you've got no leeway, you've got no room to maneuver, you've got no way to get around it. And that dramatically increases the perception of anxiety. As soon as we take out this black and white thinking and we start to introduce more options, then the nervous system can relax. It may be a case that often you feel anxious, or on many occasions you've felt anxious, and we're not denying the experiences you've had, we're just preventing you from generalizing them to mean absolutely all of them. So the way that we challenge this is, first of all, we listen to our language. So we listen out for those words, always, every, never, nothing, no one. Because anytime we hear them, we're generalizing, and then we want to question the generalization. So I always feel anxious before a team building. Okay, well, last year on the first day, I actually was really confident. I enjoyed myself. When we did this 3 years ago on my birthday, I had a wonderful time. So when we actually challenge the generalization to add a little bit more options in, it breaks the black and white thinking, so it pops the generalization and it gives you more flexibility. and this diminishes anxiety and helps you feel more in control. So generalizations are a huge one if you really want to stop feeling anxious and you want to overcome it. So when it comes to negative self-talk, the two key things that we're looking for today is eliminating asking yourself why you're feeling anxious or anything in a negative state, and then paying attention for those generalizations and really challenging them until you're absolutely certain it's not always or it's not never, so you know that actually you do both, you have both, and you have more balance. And that will make a really big impact in terms of how you think and feel.